Hi, welcome back to the Mandarin Blueprint Podcast, episode 156. This is, I was going to say this is a customer service podcast. I guess that's what Phil sometimes says as well. But it really doesn't do it justice, I don't think, because this is a lot more than that. Primarily, yes, we started the podcast as a way of communicating, just as a two-man show, trying to communicate with thousands of members that give us comments every week, and a way of responding to those comments in a more direct way at the same time, sharing with other people that might not have heard of us before. But it's become a lot more than that. It's not just really fun for both of us. It's also a cool way for us to share not just things about Chinese itself and answering questions there, which, by the way, we have a lot of those sorts of questions today about Chinese grammar and things like that, which I'll get into. But it's also about sharing, me and Phil live in China, and we have done for many years, and sharing little cultural tidbits about dealing with Chinese people, learning Chinese, the actual process itself. So you always learn something different. Every podcast is kind of really different depending on what questions we get asked. Sometimes it's more philosophical, just talking about dreams and goals and aspirations. Sometimes it's really technical and we get into the grammar of certain things, and you never know what you're going to get, and we don't either. We just sort of throw the podcast together based on what comments we have, get rid of any comments that have been asked a million times or have already been answered very thoroughly, and then everything else we just sort of keep in there, pretty much. So here we go. Before we actually jump into things, I'm not sure exactly what Phil updated you on last episode, but I just want to share that I'm really excited about the advanced course, the upper intermediate course as well. We've now split it into two courses. We have now, just after I get off the phone, after I get off recording this podcast, I'm going to get on the phone with Phil, and we're going to go through and choose the keywords, definitions for the remaining characters. So we're going to get to 3,050 characters, and of course all the words that come with that. And that's going to, later on, we're going to build lots of long form content that gets unlocked there, and lots of sentences, of course, for each word. And that's not even the end of it. I kind of went through, and Phil has been mainly the one doing all the building of the new order, and he's been working his butt off, right? And it's been there's all sorts of things coming up that he didn't expect. So we've had our whole team fixing all sorts of things with the intermediate expansion as well, just all these different plates spinning. So understandably, Phil just wanted to cut it off at 3,050, and that is absolutely enough, right? And then we were like, we had a chat, and then we sort of agreed that we would add in the remaining, maybe get to 3,300, just to make sure that we've gone through and added everything to the top, like the most common 3,000 characters, not just worrying about the HSK, so we want to get that out of the way first. Okay, let's cover HSK 1 to 9. Make sure all those characters are covered. And we got to over 3,000 just doing that. Including our previous foundation course characters and things like that. So, but then I was like, let's also do it for the 3,000 based on our corpus as well, and that led to an additional 300 characters. And then I was like, hang on, why don't I just go through all this huge character list up to 4,000 or 5,000 characters and pick out manually what I think, based on my human decision, that someone would want to learn based on what I know. And of course, Phil will do the same. So after we've now done this and gone through, and I've sort of handpicked these characters, because you don't just want to, we're all about our philosophy about building this course. It's not just about what the AI says, because there's so many problems with that. When I say AI, I mean we search a corpus of all these different resources based on more formal newspapers, movies, subtitles. It's over 1 billion different characters altogether, and that's how we get our personal character order. It's our unique method. But that is great, and I think it's a superior corpus, but it's still a corpus. It's still a corpus. Corpse is dead. It's not human. So we need to look at it with our knowledge and our experience, and also build on that. So after I went through, we basically, at the same time, I kind of wanted to get to 100 levels as well. Just a nice round number, because we're doing about 50 characters a level at this point. And I thought, it'd be nice to get to, and we're on level 88. I was like, it'd be nice to just get to 100 levels, wouldn't it? It feels like, okay. So now we're sort of going to push it to 3,600-ish characters and 100 levels. And of course, all the words that come with that. And then we're going to leave it, because seriously, after you go to, there's a reason why we use that number of 3,000 characters as like, that's all you need to know. It's not all you need to know, but seriously, after 3,000 characters, I'm looking at the list and I'm like, whoa, I don't even know that one. Okay, I've never used that one. I know that, but I've never seen it. I don't think I've ever used it. That is, sulfur in Chinese, which I suppose you might use. That's magnesium, all these sorts of different characters. So it's really at that point once you get to that 3,000 characters, or really push it, let's say 3,600 characters, get to 100 levels, you're absolutely fine. And any new characters that come up, you can make a movie for, use our mnemonic technique for learning them for sure. But they'll come up so rarely, you could probably just learn them through context. Okay, so that's, by the way, that's something that happens once you get to a higher level. You can learn a lot through context, not just because you're suddenly awesome at remembering things, but because you have such a strong foundation of Chinese on which to build upon. And this is another key thing, new stuff doesn't come up that often. Maybe a new structure, you might need to slow things down, or like an English name transliterated into Chinese, and you have to sort of slow down, but nothing brand new. Very, very few brand new. So when something is brand new, then it really jumps out at you. You don't necessarily need to go and make a card for. In fact, if you just keep reading and reading and listening, of course, listening is huge. Daily listening, daily reading, bit here, bit there, you will naturally learn, see these words again and again, and it's kind of a natural SRS. So you start with SRS, by the way, if you aren't sure, spaced repetition software, flashcards essentially, usually digital flashcards, which is what we employ earlier on in the course. But after a while, you can just ditch that because you can just naturally consume the material. And it helps obviously practice with a tutor or a language exchange partner as well to further solidify that. But that's essentially what you do after that. I would then I still only use flashcards for when I need to learn a big list of words for some reason. Like maybe I don't know, I never go on business trips, but maybe if I was and I was going to go and do a speech on food or agriculture or something like that, I'd learn a bunch of agricultural terms, and you get the idea, right? So it's more surgical in that sense, but as a general language learning tool, once you're sort of upper intermediate advanced, you can start to drop that. And that's based on not only my own experience, Phil's experience, but also feedback we've had from the course. Even when people made it through our intermediate course, which is currently the latest course, the final course of our curriculum, even like halfway through that, when people know like 1,000 characters, a few thousand words, they're kind of like, I don't want sentence cards anymore. I just want to read and listen. Some people still want the sentences, so we will eventually put sentences everywhere, but it's like, it's not essential anymore, like it was in the foundation course. Anyway, so I'm really excited. I'm looking at it, and this is our dream. This is Phil and I's dream when we first started out all those years ago, something like, 2016, we started doing it, like building the course and teaching it live and things like that. And this was like the long-term goal coming up. People can actually join Mandarin Blueprint who are really serious about learning Chinese. They want to if they want to get to a high level. Less serious people can join it too. But if you're serious about Chinese, you're a university student, or you just want to be able to read Chinese fluently and maybe and understand Chinese to as close to native as you can get, right? Yeah, I mean, you join Mandarin Blueprint, and by the time you finish it, once this expansion is completed, that's all you need. You can now read native content, listen to native content, and if you put in enough speaking practice, you can start to fluently use that native content, speak it and write it as well. So it's just awesome to see it growing and building, and it's all thanks to you guys listening and people that are on the course. You're our motivation for doing it. So it's cool. It's coming to fruition. And by the way, when it has fruited, it's come to fruition. It exists in the way that we want it. That's really only the beginning. the skeleton, if you will, of the course, which in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time will have all kinds of cool stuff extra added to it, all kinds of courses, all kinds of content, audio, written content added to it later on. But that's later, right? First, we're gonna get this done one step at a time, and go from there. So let's jump into today's first email from Richard. He says, Phil and Luke, amazing, amazing, amazing. Twice I have responded and twice I have featured in a podcast or YouTube clip. And I did respond to Richard. I said, let's make it 3 for 3. And I'll just use this on the podcast as well. What I say is true. Rote learning is a fool's game. For those that don't know, rote learning is when you write something or review something, look at something over and over and over again in order to learn it. And it is the sort of standard method of traditional language learning, and all traditional learning really. And it doesn't really work in any sense. It does work, sorry. It does work, 'cause that's how Chinese people learn Chinese characters. But it's incredibly inefficient and boring and stressful and boring, really super boring. Because you're building on something, you're learning something without any foundational knowledge. You're just shoving it into your head, okay? And then it falls out of your head pretty quick once you stop reviewing it. And that's where it's sort of stressful. Richard says, as an avid movie or TV watcher, your course is, well, easy. Saying that, if you aren't a movie or TV person, for those into music, the same rule applies. Utilize lyrics, film clips to your advantage. If you aren't into any of these suggestions, there are real-life experiences to draw upon. I was just going to add that before I read that part. Yes, exactly. Even if you're not into movies or computer games or TV shows or, even books, you're not into any of that stuff, you still have a mind and you still have the ability to visualize, and you have life to draw upon. Your people that you know, the experiences that you've had. So it's all sorts of things. It really is for everyone. Essentially, there is no excuse for people not to learn Chinese with Mandarin Blueprint. Find your medium, film, TV, music, real life, and get learning. Anki via Mandarin Blueprint is king/queen. I wouldn't say just Anki, I would say just flashcards, like social spaced repetition software. It's probably the least social thing in existence, just sitting there reviewing cards. So we will move on from Anki at some point in the future, near future, hopefully. But generally, yeah, SRS is definitely, that's the key. Hashtag lifelong member equals hashtag lifelong learner. When the borders open up from Australia, that's Australia, and to Zhongguo, that's China, we, my friends, are going for some serious yum cha time. Regards, Richard. Thank you so much, Richard. And yeah, do get in touch if you ever drop by. China. Awesome. Yeah, and everything you said, I completely agree. Well done. Next is Oscar Haglund by email. So Oscar gave us like a review. He's been on the course with us for a while. He's done an interview with us as well. And he's just making great progress, and he gives really good feedback, and has a unique perspective on the course. So he says, my name is Oscar, and I tried to start learning Chinese 6 or 7 years ago when I signed up for an evening course at university. I learned a bit, but in the end, forgot most of it. That's standard, pretty common story. 1 year ago, I made a new attempt starting with Duolingo, which I hated, and then with Mandarin Blueprint, which I love. I would just like to point out, Duolingo is where it is as an app because it works for a lot of people. We're not into like bashing other apps, but it's certainly not for everyone. Mandarin Blueprint is not for everyone either, but it's more for, Oscar is definitely someone that wants to make it to a high level in Chinese. If you want to make it to a high level in Chinese, I wouldn't recommend Duolingo. If you want the basics, you just want a few phrases, you want to have some fun, you want to learn some stuff. You can learn some characters as well using the rote learning method, but you can still learn them quite effectively, I've heard. Then that's a good choice, or at least something to experiment with. 10 months later, I can now read and write approximately 1,100 characters and many more words, and I can read native books aimed for small children. That's a fantastic achievement, i.e. not graded readers specifically targeted to my level. All of this is accomplished by studying a few hours every day. At the core of the Mandarin Blueprint method is the Hanzi movie method, a mnemonic method for remembering characters and their pronunciations. This is surrounded by a highly structured framework that provides a character learning order based on making learning easy, instead of giving you the most bang for your buck characters first, as well as plenty of graded reading content. I think it's supposed to be. Yeah, because we do focus on giving characters that are the most common, so that do give you the most bang for your buck. So maybe you need to. I didn't quite say that clearly enough. If you feel hesitant reading about how the method works and you wonder if it will really work for you, then I can tell you that since it works for me, it will probably work for you. Using this method compared to traditional learning techniques is night and day. Considering the free trial, you are making a really huge mistake if you are trying to learn Chinese without looking into this course. Well, thank you so much, Oscar. I really appreciate that. But there's a but. He says, with that out of the way, I have some additional feedback that may or may not be interesting for you. So number one is actually, I think I actually mentioned this already in the beginning of this podcast. So the first issue that Oscar has is sentence overload. He says, just like Rebecca and Christine, please go and check that interview in our podcast page on our website. Just like Rebecca and Christine talked about in their joint interview, I've also experienced that reading sentences in Anki, which is flashcards, is getting to be too much. I have been unsuspending every note in Anki, and I was on pace to finish the intermediate course by the end of the year, albeit with a crushing 2 to 2.5 hour daily review burden. When you drop the course update with 1,500 new sentences, I guess this was the straw that broke the camel's back. I went back and forth a lot and finally settled on unsuspending at least one sentence per character, and then rarely unsuspending additional ones if I saw some that were of particular interest. This way, I would still get the reading practice for many words as they would appear in sentences along the way. Yeah, I also changed the way I use the sentence cards. I have converted them all away from closed deletes into just showing me the sentence. I did this because I found that if I was to learn the card to the point that I could guess the closed delete, it would take an enormous amount of time that I just did not have. Instead, I decided that I would learn words passively in the same way I learned English, just by reading and only rarely looking words up. Well, I think this is really good points, and I think that we base this course around our assumptions. You know, a lot of this course was an experiment, and I'm very happy to say most of the experiment, the hypotheses that we base these experiments on, worked a treat, and they were correct hypotheses. You know, when to show people certain content, how to structure the course, the fact that the vast majority of people would be able to use the mnemonic technique. You know, we took a gamble on a few things based on our instinct and our experience and our knowledge about how to learn Chinese, and we were right about most of it. And the stuff that we weren't right about, we have used, based on sort of feedback like this, is what we've used to change the course. Now, I'm not saying that because Oscar and Rebecca and Christine have said they don't find sentences useful or as useful as they get further into the course, or rather they find them too much of a burden to review individually. That doesn't mean that we get rid of sentences. You still need sentences, but I think, or a lot of people still like that. I think that maybe just having the sentences there in the description, and this is what we plan on doing for the advanced course already, and we might also make a video or something about the intermediate course to tell people they could do this if they wanted to. So basically just read the sentences and make a flashcard by hand, or just obviously unsuspend them, because they're all in your flashcards already. You can just unsuspend whatever you wish. And the question about closed deletes is an interesting one, because that's something I've spoken to with Phil a couple of times, just being like, when do you think we can stop using closed deletes? And it's been a question mark for us for a while. But I think, because we were thinking about experimenting with them, and again, just looking at the sentences like Oscar's suggesting. I think for later levels, that could work, I think that, but with earlier levels, I think it's important. And you can always choose to create those closed deletes. By the way, if you're listening to this, you don't know what closed delete is. It's where you look at a sentence, and the word that the sentence is designed to teach you or to help you solidify is blocked out, so you can't see it, or one of the characters from the word. You have to guess it, so it involves extra engagement and a deeper understanding of grammar and just deeper understanding of the language itself in order to guess what the word is. But yeah, I think we could definitely do like a passive sentence pack, like a passive version, or that's definitely something we would experiment with. But we definitely want sentences, one sentence for every usage. We're adamant about that, available to you. But kind of you can use it like a sentence warehouse, like line dict or Baidu/DICT. You can choose the ones that you wish that you want to solidify further, and then as you delve into native content, long form content, you can solidify the words there too. So, yeah, absolutely. There's always a point where Anki or flashcards generally are not going to be worthwhile for everyone. Like I said at the beginning of this podcast, and it's different for different people. But I think we're, after all this time getting feedback from users, I think we're starting to pinpoint where that is, and it's somewhere around the intermediate level, the intermediate course in Mandarin Blueprint. So, yeah, we'll leave it as it is for now. But we've in terms of the intermediate course, but with the development of the new course, we're definitely not going to have sentence cards right now. We'll have them available later on down the line, but we'll definitely have, the sentence themselves, so you can make your own flashcards if you wish. But by the time you get to like 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 characters, it's like you're not a baby bird anymore. You can fly and you can create your own flashcards anytime you want, or just make notes and things like that. And it becomes a lot easier. So great feedback. The second one is Anki. So you can read this one if you go to our podcast. I'm not going to read this one out because it's kind of a moot point, because we're going to get rid of a lot of the Anki stuff anyway. We're getting rid of Anki at some point. So I'll skip 2 and 3 that are sort of Anki based. And they're sort of, so we'll go straight to 4. So he says, changing props and highlighting important props or actors. As you start the foundation course, you know nothing about which actors and which props are going to be important. You also know nothing about what makes some props good or others bad. I've had to change both props and even actors because my initial choices were bad without me realizing it. Well, I'll tell you what, we didn't know either, because we created a brand new order, and we had, we'd done a lot of research and a lot of testing with, and we eventually decided that, because we used to basically get, when we taught it live, we would say, okay, today's your homework is for next week or next lesson is to choose all 55 actors and all 13 locations, and then, and we'll do it then. And a lot of people didn't really like that. They found it too burdensome, sort of doing it all in one go. And again, it doesn't solve the problem of who's more important and stuff like that. And that's something we hadn't really thought about until way after we released the course, And it's not that important, but because again, Phil and I learned 3,000 characters. Phil learned half, like 1,500 characters purely using this method, and I never had any real issues. So neither did Phil. So we were just like, okay, well, we just based it on that experience, but we're not everyone, right? So he made a prop change here. So my first prop change was the finger component. The reason he changed it was because he had a foam finger. It's very, very common. So you need a prop that can be used in many, many ways. A foam hand is just too hard to work into many situations. People, on the other hand, can always be used in a scene, and your brain is happy to classify those people into different groups, such as fans. So he changed it from a finger into a fan. Actually, I'm assuming you mean like football fan, right? Again, I never had any issues, and most people never had any issues. But there's always someone that's or some group of people that's going to have an issue with that something, right? And you can't please all the people all the time, unfortunately. But that's something that we could definitely add to the beginning of the course. We'd say, hey, here are the most common props, so just make sure you choose them well. But to be fair, we do kind of say, choose your props carefully and wisely, and make sure you choose a prop that works, Make sure you choose a prop that stands out in your mind, and that can be interacted with, and really that's all you need. You don't necessarily, like, for example, I imagine you're thinking like the finger is restrictive, right? Because it's a finger you have to wear on your hand. You don't have to. It could be alive, could have arms and legs. It just takes a small tweak, and now the finger can do anything. Just give it arms and legs, So it takes a little bit of imagination to develop to solve those small issues. My actor change was for me, which my grandmother being changed to Marilyn Monroe. I don't have any connection to Marilyn Monroe, but my grandmother turned out to be an entirely useless actor. Well, that's not very nice to your grandmother. The problem is that my memories of her are almost exclusively of her being old and infirm. Old and infirm people are hard to use as active participants in scenes. It severely limits the scope of what your actor can do without breaking the internal consistency of the memory of your actor. Well, this is another imagination error. Okay, this is simple fix. You just imagine your grandma not sick and not infirm, and just imagine her the same person, spoke the same way, but she can stand up and move. That's no problem. That doesn't even take a huge leap. So I wouldn't really see that as too big an issue personally. As such, I would like to see more of a discussion on what makes a good actor and what does not. Additionally, we have an entire article about it, like in the sidebar. So like how to choose a prop, how to choose an actor. It's a few hundred words on each, with different ways of choosing. Choose a celebrity because of this, maybe choose someone personal to you because of this. Maybe don't choose your mother or someone really, really close to you because of this. So we do go into quite a bit of detail there. Additionally, I would also like to see some kind of information on how frequent a proper actor is going to be. Yeah, so would I. We never did that analysis. But that could be interesting, actually. There could be some interesting data to share. Picking a good actor for SH, JI, and YI is going to be much more important than picking a good one for K, Shu, and Lu. The same is true for props, where some props will be used once or twice, while other props will be used hundreds of times. Yeah, that's actually, that's useful. That one, because there is definitely a bell curve or whatever of the most useful props. And some are used many, many, many times, some are rarely used, so that could be, but at the end of the day, if you choose good actors for all of them and good props for all of them that work, that you can imagine clearly, I don't see a huge issue personally. But again, I would actually kind of want to put that information in there though, because it could be quite interesting information, and it's just kind of like at the beginning of the course, like, by the way, you're going to use this actor throughout this course 600 times. So make sure you like them or you can imagine them very clearly. And you're going to use this prop 400 times. So make sure I think I like that actually. That adds some extra depth and like extra knowledge. So thank you very much for that, Oscar. Just some really good feedback from there. And, keep going with the course. And hopefully you can give us another bit of feedback once you make it through to 3,600 characters. Sorry, Phil. Awesome. So next we have, just a quick one from Richard again. He says, this is on language learning tripod, part 1, attitude. He says, this bonus is amazing. I love how you talk about cultural elements. And I can't take credit for this. We're just big fans of Steve Kaufman, and this is his idea, the language learning tripod. We just put it in the pronunciation mastery. It's a bonus. It was one of my favorite sort of language learning concepts. I believe he's updated it now. So there was attitude. Oh God, I'm going to embarrass myself and forget them now, aren't I? But this one's attitude. Attitude, attentiveness, and time. That's it. I remember now. So having a positive attitude, believing that you can become fluent in Chinese or in any language, because you can. And that's actually one of the toughest ones to overcome. So I can't take credit for the language learning tripod. That's actually Steve Kaufman's idea, and we took it straight out of his blog and of course we gave him credit for that. But I just remember as a learner looking at this idea, the tripod of language learning, and finding it really useful. So I threw it in as a bonus, because the pronunciation mastery course is it's designed for people just starting out their journey, often for the first time learning a language that's not their native language, and it's just really good advice. So attitude is one of the 3 parts of the tripod. Then there's attentiveness, looking out for things, noticing things, which I believe he's replaced now with something else, as he's been inspired by Luca Lampariello, who's also another renowned polyglot that I also admire a lot personally. But I can't remember what he changed it to. I can't remember what he changed attentiveness to, but of course it's something else useful. And time, putting in the time. You've got to put in the time. 5 minutes a day is not going to cut it. 30 minutes at least minimum, 1 hour ideally at least, to really see some regular breakthroughs So attitude is all about, well, what it sounds like, maintaining positivity, believing that you can actually become fluent and literate in Chinese or any language that you're learning, which is harder than it sounds, especially if you've never become fluent in that language. Often there's people we've had on our course that have learned way more languages than us. They've learned like Spanish, German, Italian, even other Asian languages, and they're like, I just can't learn Chinese though, it's just too hard, I can't do that. It's still not confident because they haven't learned that specific language. So I get that challenge for sure. But then there's also just accepting the culture. That's a part of attitude as well. Being open to the culture, not really seeing yours as superior. Obviously, everyone's always going to be biased, but just try and see it from let's say from a neutral perspective. Try and see the positive side of the culture, and I hope we sort of help you out. Help you out there, highlighting certain things about Chinese culture that are very positive, and that's something you should keep in mind, especially when you live in China. Otherwise, you're not going to have a good time. So thank you for that, Richard. Next is Andrew on another bonus lesson. He says, from my knowledge of Chinese characters, this is, I believe, in response to Jessica. I think she mentioned that she can't really see sorry if it wasn't Jessica, but someone who commented saying they can't really see the purpose of stroke order, or like getting the strokes in the right order. And Andrew says, from my knowledge of Chinese characters from several masters I have met, the stroke order allows the character to be correctly balanced, especially in calligraphy. When the stroke order is correct, the end of a previous stroke gives the writer a starting point to ensure the next stroke is aligned correctly or centered with the other strokes. This is why children's writing books have a square grid in the background, so they can try and make sure the character they write is balanced within the square structure. Yeah, I am all for taking shortcuts in Chinese, and I like to throw out anything that's not useful. But stroke order is 100% necessary and useful if you ever want to write a character down. Now, if you never want to write a character down or be able to write a character well, clearly, so that a native speaker or reader can read it, then fine. But there's going to come a time where you might need it. We might need to write something down. Maybe there's or like if you want to, this is probably the most common usage of writing characters into a dictionary that you see, new characters into a dictionary to look them up. It can recognize, but it's harder, and it's just generally it's way smoother and faster and more comfortable to write it with the correct stroke order. So yeah, I certainly I'm neither Phil or myself like to stick to old things if they're not necessary, just for the purpose of sticking to them. But that's something I would stick to, is stroke order. Ray Jen on time to get real about sentences. This is phase 3, where you've now built your foundation of pronunciation. You've learned a bunch of characters. You've learned a bunch of words. And you've learned enough words for us to supply you with example sentences. And it's one of my favorite lessons to read in terms of the comments, because people, for the first time, and it's quite early on, it's like level 13, after learning 104 characters, where they can, just with those small, that's relatively very small amount of characters, they can read full sentences, and a lot of them as well. And so we just here's all the sentences you can read, and people just love it, because it's like, oh my goodness, I started this course. Some people takes them a week to get there, that's very quick. But some people it takes a couple of months or whatever. But they're just like, wow, I can't believe I can read Chinese. I can understand what's going on. It's such a cool feeling. Anyway, so Ray is getting that feeling now, and he's when he sent this a few days ago, and he says, I can't believe it. I can read complete Mandarin sentences without pinyin or English, by the way. That's the key point of this. 0 pinyin, 0 English. I am not the person to write a comment, yet I feel this is the time. It's 12:25 a.m. East Coast time, and I'm contemplating staying up until 3 a.m. Phil and Luke, your method works, and it's amazing. Thank you so much, Ray. And as I always say, or often say when I see this kind of comment, it's just like, you have barely scratched the surface yet of what you're going to be capable of in a few weeks, months, year or two's time. So I look forward to hearing your feedback on that. Rose on sheng, this character in context. Well, Japanese has 新鮮. 新鮮 means fresh. Japanese essentially just has a traditional version of that. We teach simplified in this course. And Japanese uses many traditional characters in their language. So that's the same as in Chinese. There are many similarities between Japanese and Chinese sometimes, and Chinese sometimes. There are also many differences, of course, and I love comparing the two languages. And yes, you have a knowledge of Japanese, and the cool thing about that is, Rose, you'll be able to draw on that knowledge to help you learn Chinese. They sort of piggyback on each other. And likewise, you can maybe use Chinese to learn more Japanese later on or whatever. And the more knowledge you have, the more things you have to stick to. So for example, if you're learning words in Chinese, you can connect those words to things that sound or look like that in Japanese. You can create mnemonics faster and easier, more effective mnemonics. That's one of the very many benefits of learning languages and multiple languages. Another one from Rose here on 星期. 星期 means week. So 一个星期 is a week. And she asks, can't Sunday also be 星期日? Yes, the answer is yes. 星期日 can also be Sunday. So Sunday is 星期天. Like that's, I guess, would be the most common one based on my experience. 星期日 would be slightly more formal. When you say 日 for day, it just tends to sound a bit more formal. Okay. So there's another way of saying Sunday, which is 周日. Okay, so that's slightly more formal. If you say 周一, 周二, 周三, or 星期一, 星期二, 星期三, there's hardly any difference for me personally, but I guess you could say saying 周一 and 周二 is slightly more formal. But, that's just my personal experience. I don't think there's much difference between them. I use them interchangeably all the time. I hear them interchangeably all the time. But there's a third one, which is 礼拜, which is, so 礼拜一, 礼拜二, or 一个礼拜. That's the most common usage of it, where it's like you're referring to a week as a whole. I very rarely hear 礼拜一, 礼拜二, 礼拜天, like for Sunday. I wouldn't bother using that one. I just personally haven't heard it very much at all. But those first two or three, 星期日, 星期天, and 周日 are all Sunday. So go ahead and check those out. Next one is Ómar, level 2 complete. He says, I'm just getting started with the hands and movie method, and I must admit I've been pretty skeptical about the movie scenes and this ceremony. It's like the process of doing it. I was reviewing some cards today, I don't have many yet, and got the character 个, as in 一个, and couldn't remember anything about it. Well, this doesn't sound too good, but wait, there's more. Instead of just hitting space and giving up, I spent some time with it. I remembered the umbrella, the stick, and I was in a room I used to spend a lot of time in, and then George Clooney showed up and pointed out something in the room, and there was the word. I'm still a bit weirded out by what happened, had to share. Yeah, so what you've done there, Ómar, is you've created deep connections on to many different parts of your life, your psyche and things like that. So what will happen with this method, that happens with any method that you have, is that you forget stuff that you learn, okay? But the cool thing about this method that other methods don't have is that when you forget something, that's just, imagine that your memory of this character, Ge, is like a spider with many different legs, probably a lot more than 8 legs, stretching out to all different parts of your brain, your memories throughout your entire life and your experiences. One of those legs dies, and so you lose access to the neuron, let's say, the body of the spider. You lose access through that path. But because you have so many other legs to work with, you can connect to the actor, the prop, the place, the smells, the sensations of that place, the sounds, of course, the keyword, all these different aspects of the character you can connect to. And what happens then is that then it lights up and relights up all the legs again. So all those legs that went dead, or the leg that went dead, it kind of brings them back to life. And so with rote learning, there's very limited connections. So there's very limited connections to there's like one connection to the piece of information. So as soon as that goes dead, it's dead, and you have to sort of rebuild it from scratch using another single leg, single connection. So that's what you're experiencing there. And it does take a while to figure it. For some people, it takes a while to it works. What tends to happen is that you doubt it and it sounds weird, but you're like, there's so many comments of people enjoying it. So I guess I'll just keep going, and see how it goes. And then one day you're in the car or you're walking down the street and you just realize that you know like 15 characters after just a couple of hours or an hour or two of work. Not just know them, but you know how to pronounce them accurately and to write them and as well as read them. So, and then that's usually when. But it takes until about level 2 to actually get that. But I'm glad you're starting to get that now, Ómar. Awesome. And Giles, vocab unlocked from 比, which means to compare. 比如 is a word that means, for example. 比如说is the most common way it's used, most likely. She says, trying to keep some characters and props straight. 勺 means spoon, and 比 means ancient spoon. So she then writes a sentence here. Would this be correct? 比如, and then it's 比一个比字。我更喜欢新勺子。First of all, I don't know what 比字 is. I don't think you can say that. I don't think that there's a word for ancient spoon. Like that you could just say that means it's not quite that simple. You can't say that's ancient spoon, that component, and then just say 比字 and just add a 字 on the end, and then it's suddenly an ancient spoon. So there's not a word that I know of, and certainly not a word that the average Chinese person would be able to understand what you mean. But what I would like to look at here is how you've used 比, which is not quite correct, but you need to use a different word for comparisons, and that is 相比. Okay, so if you look on screen, I've added some simple example sentences that I just copied and pasted from Pleco here for you, Anne. And this is, so what you're trying to do is saying, for example, compared to this, I prefer this. 我更喜欢新勺子. Right? That second part, by the way, 我更喜欢, is absolutely fine. Right? But when you say, you can't say 比一个什么什么东西. You can't use that. You can only say 这个比这个好. Right? So 我比你好. Right? You can only use it with 比 sort of in the middle, embedded within that structure in the center. You can't start off with that. But here's how you would say what you're trying to say using 相比, right? Which is a much more effective word for this particular structure. So here's an example sentence here. 他不能和我们的模范员工相比. So he cannot compare to our model worker, or he cannot hold a candle to, right? The key structure to look out for is 和, which means and or with, and 相比. So 你不能和我相比. You cannot compare to me. Okay? So that's one way of using it. But it's also paired with 与, which also is just a bit more formal way of saying with. So it's the same as 和 really in this context. So let's look at this other sentence here. 与其他人相比, compared with other people, 你是相当高了. You are pretty tall. So you're quite tall compared with others. So you can see that it can be used at the beginning of a sort of sentence. It can be used at the end. 和什么什么相比, or 与其他人相比. So 与什么什么相比, or 和什么什么相比. So that's two ways of using it. There's another way here. This is the most formal. Okay, this is only as far as I can tell in writing. 同去年相比. 同 means with in this context. It's a very formal way of using it. 产量增加了 20%. So output, production has increased by 20%. Compared to last year. 同去年相比. Okay? And then I thought I'd add this third one here, which is it's more like a verb phrase, or not verb phrase. It's just a phrase with 相比 in it. 相比之下. Right? So in comparison, or by comparison, it's just a way of, it's almost like a conversation connector, as we like to say. It's like a way of, it's a fixed phrase that you can use to sort of give yourself a bit more time and sound really formal. It's not formal. It's sort of okay. It's average. 相比之下呢? Yeah, I guess it is. But when you have 之 put in there, it's pretty formal. All right, but yeah, so maybe not like in really casual speech, but you could use it in more formal settings, no problem. 相比之下, so by comparison, 他的作文比你写得好. 他的作文比你写得好. Actually, I didn't even notice that. That's also got the 比 in there. So that shows you how to use 相比 or 相比之下
and be in the same sentence, so you can see them compared there. So I hope that helps, and I hope that helps other people listening. That's just a bit more of a higher level way of making comparisons that you should go out there and try using. Next is Linn on Make a Movie for Horror. She says, this is a bit random, but I just realized that this character concludes my initial goal of learning, quote unquote, just a few Chinese characters. Half a year ago, I had started to learn Korean when I came across a lesson where the days of the week were presented alongside the Chinese characters for sun, moon, fire, water, wood, gold, and earth. Being easily distracted, I thought, wouldn't it be fun to learn these Chinese characters as well? And a quick Google search later, I stumbled upon someone recommending the Mandarin blueprint method. And now here I am on character 412, after what was supposed to be a half-hour side quest into Mandarin. So Phil and Luke, thanks a lot for the amazing course. Now my 1-year subscription to Korean lessons are completely going to waste. Haha. I am having way too much fun to stop anytime soon. I love the comparison to side quests. I used to play RPGs and stuff like that, like role-playing games before I had a kid. And that would, yeah, like you go on, you go, oh, I'm going to go and do the main quest, and you get distracted by a million other side quests. But I'm glad it's a good distraction, right? It's actually productive. You're not just caving, hunting goblins in a cave. You're actually building a lifelong skill, which is an incredibly valuable skill. So well done, Linn, and onward to the next 1,000 characters. Next is Doug on New Vocabulary Unlocked. So he says, I don't know why, but I keep forgetting your advice about not spending too much time on getting the word flashcards set up. As a result, I put off doing the word lessons and stopped progressing through the level. I'm getting comfortable with making movies for the individual characters and not stressing about having a perfect scene for them. Yeah, that's good to hear, Doug. Well done. It's easy to obsess over things a little bit, making sure you have everything right. But there's also one of the things I had to learn personally is like when to let go, when to sort of take it easy and not stress about learning everything and doing everything perfectly, because it actually hinders you. There is that phrase, isn't it? The perfect is the enemy of the good, and that does apply to this as well. So I'm glad you've made that come to that realization. That's awesome. Next is Gary on moving forward. So this is the end of the pronunciation mastery course, just another bonus. Thanks for the tip. Shadowing is great. I found a good source that someone created for Anki, 20,000 sentences. I'm learning some new vocabulary for sure, but the main benefit is it's improving my listening, the hardest part of language learning, in my opinion. Now, Gary, you're just starting you're in the pronunciation mastery at the moment. You won't need to worry about using that deck anymore, that 20,000 sentences deck. We provide 7,000 sentences throughout our course, at least in the foundation intermediate course. All with native male and female audio, and most importantly, they're all written so that you can understand them almost 100%. So with the 20,000 sentences, there's a lot of input, but a lot of the sentences, I remember this from myself personally, using that deck for a long time, spending many hours with it. There's a lot of, it's HSK based, and there's a lot of very formal language in there. So it's not ideal. It's good though, considering the fact that it's free and it's open software, whatever, and it's sort of a generic deck. It's very good, but yeah, you won't need it much longer. Listening. I wouldn't say listening is the hardest. I always say listening is just the longest. It's actually the easiest in terms of how simple it is to improve listening. It just takes the most time. So I guess, especially from a Chinese person's perspective, they consider if something takes a long time, that means it's difficult. But it's just how the Chinese tend to think about problems. But it's straightforward. You just have to listen to stuff that you can understand, but you just have to put a lot of time in listening. And you can't fake listening either, right? There's only so much like a smile and a nod can get you. But yeah, you're basically right on that. It's a tough one. It takes time. So let me know, Gary, how you get on with the phase 1, phase 2, the rest of the course. Keith on level 14 complete says, the last couple of levels have been fun. Yeah, because he's been reading sentences for the first time. I did take some advice you gave and always do my flashcard reviews before taking any new lessons. I find it less stressful because I can end the studies at any point and be sure that I didn't misjudge the amount of time that reviewing would take. That's great, good idea. But I would recommend also leaving a little bit of time after maybe you've already included this anyway, but just checking that you include the time it takes to do the first review or first couple of reviews for the new lessons that you've just covered. So if you've just learned 10 characters in a session, make sure you review those characters one time each, the new cards, before finishing off for the day. That's important. And he goes on, he says, I'm sure you've seen Randall Munro's You Go a 5. No, I haven't. And perhaps this Thing Explainer, which stick to 1,000-word English vocabulary and attempt to explain complex topics. That I've heard of. I highly recommend, there's a link in there as well, I highly recommend you guys to go check that out, xkcd.com, or just the Thing Explainer. I think I'm looking at two different things there. And that just shows you what you can do with 1,000 words, which is what you will learn if you complete our foundation course. We based our foundation course on those 1,000 words, based on our choosing, with a lot of human decision making and analysis from that huge corpus that we talked about earlier, to cover 8. So with 1,000 words, you can get to 80% of the entire language by coverage. And will it make you fluent the way most people consider it? No, absolutely not. You will not be fluent, but you'll be able to do a lot. There's a lot you'll be able to do with a bit of creativity if you really know those words very well. It says, I imagine anyone who's worked on graded readers would appreciate them and the reactions that people have to them. Yes, thank you for that very much, Keith. I think I would like to check that out too. Next is just a quick question from Jason Pon. Does 点点头 mean to nod? And the answer is yes. 点点头. 点点头. It's so funny. I just our neighbor's baby, well, she's like a year and a half now. She's like, that's what her mom and dad said. 你要你点点头，要你点点头. Yeah, if you want it, 点点头. She's like that. 点点头. So it's more like a 点头. 点头is just like a nod, like a normal word, but 点点头, just when you double it up, it makes it a little bit sort of more cutey, more cute for like little kids and stuff. Or just more playful, more casual. It sort of adds that effect to it. Next is Gavin. He says, at this stage, I'm still a bit confused about the difference in meaning between 这样 and 这么 or 这样. You can't say 这么, you say 这么 only. I haven't hit the vocab in context lesson yet, so I'm hoping it will make more sense then. Yes, I'm sure it will, because whenever you see some stuff in context, that's when things start to make sense. Right? You can't learn words on their own. They have to be learned in context of sentences. You can learn a word partially on a very shallow level, but I always compare it to getting to know people. You learn a new word, like you meet a new person somewhere, and you say, my name's Luke, and they tell you their name, and you shake hands. Do you know that person? Technically, yes, but you don't know that person very well, do you? You need to see that person in different contexts, different places, talk about different things, in order to actually say that you know that person. And the longer you talk to them, the more you talk to them in different places about different things and interact with them and do things with them, then you learn. Then you can say, like, after a few years or a few months of doing that, now I know that guy, So that's how I like to compare things with words. So anyway, let's look at 这样 and 这么, right? Because a lot of these things I know instinctively, and you will come to know instinctively as well. And then actually explaining the difference, I really whistled there, sorry about that. Really explaining the difference, like grammatically or linguistically, it's really difficult. Even if you know, like you ask a native speaker to do it. But the best way is to explain it, is to look at a few example sentences. Here we go. So here's number one. 一会儿这样, 一会儿那样. So you can see here that 这样 is used to mean this way. You could not say 一会儿这么. 这么 always has to have something after it. But with 这样, you can say, stop being 这样. 你为什么要这样? Why do you have to be this way? So 这样. This way, or one way. Next sentence. 你怎么病成这样了? 病成这样了. So this is a fixed phrase. 成这样 is a phrase that you'll hear, and you can use it with other things too. Here they're using it with 病, like to be sick. How did you get so ill? How did you get ill to this point? 成这样, 成 to become, and 这样 this way, become this way. Another one is very common, maybe even more common, is 累成这样了. 累 is tired. 你怎么累成这样了? Like, how did you get so tired? What are you doing to yourself? Go sleep, go rest. So that's, you can't say 累成这么了. Like, again, it has to have something after it, something substantial, like an adjective usually, like 这么高. All right, we'll get into that in a sec. Next one here is 大家都这么 or 这样说. All right, so this is where both can be used. I would say personally that 这么 in this context, 他们这么说, 他们是大家都这么说. They said like this. So 这么 is more like this in this way. But in this particular context, 这样说 can also be used, but 这么说 is more common. So it can be 这么 follows. You can see that 说 is a verb, right? So you can see that 你为什么这么做? 你为什么这么做? Why did you do it this way? 做 is to do, right? 你为什么这样做? Is less common, doesn't sound quite as right, but I believe it is used as well. And then finally, 这件衣服这么贵. So this is probably the most common usage of 这么 that makes it different from 这样. This is the only a 这么 thing, which is so expensive. 这件衣服, this piece of clothing, 这么贵, so expensive. 我没想到. I did not expect this to be accepted. 我没想到 is I did not expect. That's another cool phrase you can use. And that's it, really. That's. I looked through a ton more example sentences, and basically that's the only four. It's like the only places where they're different. So they can be interchangeable in some instances, as we talked about, but they do really have their own unique usages. So I hope that helps. Mirko R on Make a Movie for, which means noon. He says, I have a bit of a challenge here. I've already learned 400 characters using a different mnemonic method, learning Chinese characters by Matthews. I'm familiar with that. It works quite differently from the movie method, so this raises two questions. Should I relearn the characters that I've already learned? Can I pick the symbols, props I've already picked? For example, the loser above is the cloud in the other method. Thanks. Number one, should I relearn the characters? Only relearn the characters if you don't know them. And when I say no, I mean no like a Chinese person. That's our standard, is Chinese standard. Can you read it? Can you read it out loud? Can you understand it? And can you pronounce it with at least one accurate pronunciation? No problem at all. And can you write it? The writing kind of is, I don't hold myself to that standard. But I think it's a nice bonus to be able to write it. You certainly don't need to be able to write 3,600 characters or 3,000 characters, right? It's very unlikely you're going to be doing that. But that's a good standard to hold yourself to. Be strict. Do you know that? Right, at least the first two of those. Can you pronounce it and read it and understand it easily? If no, then yes, use our method to learn it. If you know it like the back of your hand, you can even write it, definitely don't bother. Just skip it. And if you forget it later, you can always use our methods to learn it later. And can I pick the symbols, props that I've already picked? Yes, absolutely. Why not? If you've already got an association with that, that's a strong association, that's all you'd need. All right. So that goes for anyone else that's coming into our method from other methods, mnemonic or otherwise. It's easily transferable, this knowledge. So next is Rose on one of our stories, the Nighttime Beauty, Daytime Witch, 巫婆与美女. She says, it's really cool to be able to read these, and now I'm curious about how this story goes. So that's kind of what we do. We tease you as your skills develop. You go from random sentences. You go from components, then characters, then words, and then phase 3, you get sentences. They're just random sentences that you can read and understand. And then you start getting sentences in phase 4 that are part of bigger stories, part of paragraphs. Then you unlock these short stories and paragraphs. And then these paragraphs, once you get to phase 5, they start to unlock full stories. So they also unlock in random order. So you kind of get like paragraph 3 of, the witch story or the different articles that we've got.
And it really builds curiosity by the time you get through phase 5 and into the intermediate course. You're like, what is that story about? I want the whole thing. And of course, eventually you do unlock it at both 80%, when you're at 80% understanding, and 98% understanding, 2 different levels. So you can compare that. So yeah, Rose, it's awesome, isn't it? Let me know how you feel once you get to full stories. Next one is George. Just a really quick question. Is there any difference in the usage between 要是 and 如果? And the answer is absolutely no difference in usage, although you could say that 如果 is slightly more formal. Right? So 要是 is very spoken, and 如果 is also spoken, but it's also formal. This can be used in both situations. It's not that if you use 如果 in a conversation with a Chinese person, they'd be like, whoa, this guy's sounding really formal or anything. It's just that it's not as casual as 要是 is. Okay, so I hope that clears that up. Next is Rose again on what's 起来's function in 这条鱼. This fish 吃起来 tastes like or tastes 还不错. So that's what the sentence is saying. 这条鱼吃起来还不错. This fish tastes good, or pretty good. 还不错 is pretty good. And again, 起来, if you look up 起来, right, with 2 fifth tones, 起来 with a third tone and second tone, or just third tone and fifth tone, it means sit up. No, sorry. Hang on a second. Third tone and second tone, right? You say 起来. Yeah, so if you say 起来 with the full tones, then it literally means stand up or up, rise up or sit up, just an upward motion. But when it says when it's 起来 like with 2 fifth tones, it's different. Okay, so look that up in Pleco, Pleco dictionary, 起来, and click on the 2 fifth tone ones, and you'll see all these different usages for it. It's a very diverse. It's not even really a word. It's more like just a compliment, I suppose. So here are some examples of just some of them. I believe I've gone through this before in a previous podcast, but it's worth going over again. So 起来, if it looks like, sounds like, feels like, tastes like, smells like, so you can say 看起来要下雨. It looks like it's going to rain, or it looks like rain. 听起来颇有道理, like, that makes sense. Sounds reasonable. Or you can say 吃起来闻起来, you say all sorts of things so to something sounds like. You can also use it for start doing something. 唱起歌来. So you can also, 起来 can also be separated, and you can put the noun in there as well. 唱起歌来老不搭调. 老不搭调. Lao bu is like always not this way, right? So he's always gets out of tune. 不搭调 is out of tune. So he's always out of tune. Next is like an upward, just a general upward motion. So 病人能坐起来吗? 病人能坐起来吗? Can the patient, the sick person, sit up? 坐起来. So 坐起来 is not. It's used with sit to like to for the upward motion of it, and then completeness or effectiveness. 想起来了. All right, so 想起来了 means, I've remembered that. I remember now. I've got it. 这是杜甫的诗句. It's a line from 杜甫, is a famous Sichuan Chinese poet. And the final one, it said forming a verbal topic. I don't know what that means, so I just put a question mark. But basically, 说起来容易，做起来难. So to say it is easy to say, hard to do. Easier said than done, basically. So it's got all these different meanings, and they kind of overlap to a certain degree, don't they? You can tell. But generally, yeah, very, very diverse, and it's worth, keeping an eye out for it, checking some example sentences. All right, so that's the end of our just general emails and comments for this week. Let's just jump into the final section of the podcast, which is vocab living links. So people send us in their mnemonic ideas of how to learn various compound words throughout the course. So compound words are words with more than one character. And this is like where you get really into the course now. And we'll often use the clips that I'm about to create to actually build the course itself.
to help people out in the future. So this is one of the benefits, the bonuses you could say, of becoming a Mandarin Blueprint member. Your comments become part of the course. It's a living course. And say one thing that we're going to start doing as well, because there's tons of people that will come up with great comments that we want to add to the course, but it's already got a video. So what we'll start doing is taking the video down, combining them together, and making like compilation videos, so that it builds up on each other like that. I think that's a really cool way, because I don't want just because you missed the boat on a certain video, I don't want to. That means you'll never get into the course. You know what I mean? Because it's such an important thing. People love it. We love it, and people love seeing other people's comments in the videos. And then they scroll down and say, oh, there's the comment, and there's the link to the video. So it's just a cool little system we've got going on. So let's jump into the first one here. Rose from 头. So the words unlocked here are 回头, which means to look back, 头发, which means hair, 木头, which means wood, and 舌头, which means tongue. So Rose says for 舌头, you can use that famous picture of Albert Einstein. Yeah, 舌头is like so simple. 舌is tongue, and 头is used with a fifth tone here. It's quite subtle. It's a suffix, actually. And it's just, it's added there just like 叉子, the 子 in so many Chinese compound words. 叉子, 饺子, just basically saying this is a noun. All right, next word. Whoever made up these compound words, they were like in a committee and they were like, it's almost 5 p.m. Let's just add a 字 on the end and make it a noun. Let's move on. 头 is the same sort of thing. It's just a suffix to make a noun, right? And it to make it 2 characters makes it just flow better. So 蛇 instead of 蛇, which is actually snake. So I don't want to confuse it with snake. So I say 舌头, right? 舌头. So you could just stick a picture of Albert Einstein or some other, or licky tongue like a Pokemon, something like that, and that would be more than enough for this particular one. So for the other ones, we've got 回头, literally means return head. Now, I've watched Rick and Morty before, and I just, as soon as I saw this word, I think of that show me what you got, like that big head, and it keeps going away and then coming back with more people. So it's literally 回头, like returning head, or art attack. If you're British, you're and you're about my age, 30-ish, you'll know art attack and the head. I'm the head, right? And so that's my personal connections. I'm probably like 20% of the population would actually understand either of those. But you get the idea. Something to do with the head. But you could also just 回头, like to return head, is also fairly literal. Right? So if someone's walking away and they turn back, it's like their head's returning to look at you. So you could think of maybe a romantic movie or a sad movie where someone does that. Like, what's that one? Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. And he leaves and he doesn't 回头. I just remember that scene. But what's a scene where someone does look back and they go back in the end? I'm sure you could think of something if you're a movie person. 头发. 头发, hair. I mean, literally it means head, hair. Right, so there's not much there for the characters, is there? So just get a picture of someone with crazy hair, and that should be enough. 木头. 木头. So 木 is tree, or the old, the character representing tree, and 头 is just again that 头, just it's a piece of tree. So again, not much. I would just get maybe a tree turning into wood, maybe being cut down, made into 木头. So it's tree. So it's 木 being made into 木头. And I think that should be enough. These are all really straightforward, so not much to worry about here. Next is Jonathan Glazier, vocab unlocked for 至少. Okay, I'm English, so this is great. At least, so 至少 means at least, right? At least it didn't rain. Picture of a village fete, barbecue, etc., etc. Yes, that's British. That'll work quite well. And I really like the characters. They're not like so obvious to the point where they're boring, like 勺子 or something. 至少, 至 is like until small, right? Too small. So it's like
to the smallest. It's like, so at least, right? It just makes sense. So you could maybe write a note about that as a mnemonic. So yeah, I would use some sort of sarcastic, depressing English, sort of maybe Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh style comment, sort of a bit negative. Well, there's a meme as well from Bill Murray. I got that going for me, which is nice. At least I got that going for me, which is nice. So I'm sure you'll think of something there. Next, Rose on 风景. Yeah, so this is a nice one. Do you know what? Rose says sakura trees, 樱花, cherry blossoms. And that's actually pretty significant for me, because where I am, where I live, there's like people come all around this city just to come into my complex and see the sakura trees. It's just packed with sakura trees, and they only bloom once a year for about 2 or 3 weeks, and that's it. And it's just packed with tourists. I'm like trying to get home, and the word 风景 has 风 in it, has wind, so I can imagine cherry blossoms blowing on the wind would be quite a cool sort of image to have in there as well. Annette, Bicknell, Vocab unlocked for 手机 and 飞机. These are really straightforward in terms of their characters, aren't they? Hand machine and flying machine. He says, the German loan word handy refers to a mobile phone. I did not know that. Handy. The hand is right there holding the machine. I did not know that. Nice. Yeah, that's a good one. I think I can't really improve on that one. And for 飞机, of course, we could just have, so yeah, for 手机, you can have 手机, I'd have Trigger Happy TV with a huge phone. Again, British reference, sorry. But basically it's like a prank show. Trigger Happy TV, just look it up and type in Trigger Happy TV phone, and that's what I would use for 手机. Or just someone with a huge hand holding a tiny phone, that'd be funny. 飞机, again, pretty boring, pretty straightforward, just picture of just a standard plane, or maybe it doesn't have to be a standard plane, it could be a plane from like a movie scene that you like, just go with that. Next one here is Keith on Vocab Unlocked from 司 as in 公司 and 司机. So for 公司, it means company. One potential connection is that many privately owned startups dream of having an ISO and going public. Since shareholders have voting rights, in a way, they are hoping to be publicly operated. So that is what Gong and Si are saying. That's a really good connection to those two characters. Gong, public, and Si is to operate. And that's kind of what any business is doing as well, just on to go deeper on that. Like any business, whether it's an ISO or going public or not, every business is public, right? It's available for finding what it is. Every legal business. Like a shop, like down the road, that's public. It's open to the public. It relies on the public. And so it is kind of publicly controlled, right? Because if the public don't like what you're selling, you ain't going to survive, right? So that's probably where that word comes from. And then 司机 means driver, control, machine. Boom. I mean, there's not much more you need there. So for 公司, I just find a picture of like a CEO or like a bunch of CEOs from a company or your own company. And then 司机, I just find a picture of a driver. I'm immediately thinking of, not Harold, what's his name? Jim Carrey from Dumb and Dumber, where he's the limo driver with the missing tooth. Yeah, that's what I would go with. No, sorry, broken tooth, not missing tooth. All right. So that would work really well. Jonathan Glazier on Vocab Unlocked for 出来, so 出来, 出去, 出国, 出发, 出现. All right. This is great. This is a really good one. So 出现. So literally it means to appear. So 出現. So it's out, and 現, like 現 is also kind of appear as well. It has that meaning. Or it can mean present if you want to go with something a bit more abstract, right? Like a phoenix, just in capital letters, like a phoenix rising, I will emerge speaking fluent Mandarin. I think that 出 also looks a bit like a phoenix.
Brilliant. That's what we want. That's what we want. 出现. Yes. I can't think of anything better than that. That's great. So we've also got 出来, 出去. So those are pretty simple. Like 出来 is something coming out towards you. 出来, so come towards the speaker, which should be you, right? So maybe a hostage situation, right? A negotiator trying to get the hostage taker to come out. 出去, go out, get out, 出去. So easy, angry, someone angry pointing at a door, shouting at someone. 出国, we are 出国, I want to leave the country. Someone who's committed a terrible crime and needs to leave, or like been embezzling money or something, and he's like a guy in a business suit. Get a picture of that. It's like all disheveled with like papers, like maybe money coming out of a briefcase, and just sort of panicking. That'd be a good one for me. And 出发, that means to leave. Let's go. 我们出发吧. Let's go. And which means open the door, and 发, like send out. So I would picture someone, just to really run that into the ground, I would say picture someone open the door and flying out. Someone flying out the door, or like running really fast out the door, just to make sure. Maybe holding their family as well, just like, because usually 出发 is like together as a family. Let's go. We've already done 出现, so that's great. All of those are done. Hope you like those. So that is the last comment for this week. It's all the emails, comments that we've had that we wanted to share with you this week. Please keep those coming. If you're on the course and you haven't sent us any messages in a while or at all, please do so. Comment on the platform. Send us emails. We love hearing from you. We love solving problems, especially problems that we used to have ourselves, which are most of them. And yeah, if you have listened this far to the podcast, you've listened to the whole thing, especially me talking about phoenixes and things that it might not make much sense to you, and you're still here. I think it's probably worth checking out the course, don't you? Maybe a 14-day free trial, which you can access from our website, mandarinblueprint.com. Let's go ahead and get started. And for everyone else, I will see you in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye.